to do a quick recap of the change, also called the helping process in social work practice. Now, we have two learning objectives at the end of this session. Hopefully, you are able to define the change process and secondly, describe the stages of the change process. Now, let's do a quick recap question. What is the change process in social work? Quickly jot that down. Okay, let's see if you got that correct. The change process in social work practice involves the dynamic and interactive process where social workers intervene into the client's life to effect positive changes. Check your response and see how well you did. Let's also look at pre assessment questions. Number one, name two change process stages. And number two, which stage deals with greeting the client? Quickly jot your responses here. All right, let's go into the lesson. So keep your responses and see how well you did. Now, the first stage is the engagement stage. This is where the social worker introduces herself or himself to the client. And let's pretend here for teaching purposes that it's the first time the social worker is meeting the client. It's a new client. The social worker then inquired what brought the client to the agency. This is where you deal with problem identification. What is the problem or issue that's affecting the client? Thirdly, the social worker now ascertains whether the client is at the correct agency. After a couple of questions, the social would be able to know whether the agency has the services available to help the client. If not, then the client is referred to appropriate agency. Then finally, the social worker gathers relevant information from the client. Now, information will be in your intake form, that is a pre-arranged form that has your demographics and, of course, additional information that will be needed in this instance. Then we move on to the assessment stage. Now, this stage is where, after the information is gathered from the engagement stage, the social worker then collects, organizes, and interprets the client's information. The social worker here also makes a hypothetical type of assessment, thinking based on the information gathered whether what brought the client to the agency. So the social worker is sort of free thinking things based on the information that's available to the social worker. Then, of course, the social worker assesses the client's strengths. Now, as a social worker, we work from the strengths based approach, right? So the client's strengths are assessed here. Then we move on to the intervention stage. Now, the word intervention, anytime you see that word, please remember action. So something is going to be happening here. You're doing something on behalf of the client. And the first thing we start with is developing mutually agreed upon goals, intervention goals with the client. Now, please, the words with the client is very paramount. We do not develop goals for the client, goals that we think that the client should work on. No, we can suggest goals, but it's up to the client. Don't forget client self-determination. It's up to the client to decide whether they wish to work on the goals that was suggested. And secondly, we select appropriate intervention strategies based on all the information gathered thus far. For instance, it might be the systems theory or the cognitive behavioral theory. Then we initiate actions to achieve these goals. And an example could be the client wish to re-enter education. And as such, the client goal is basically to go and seek an educational facility that would be of interest to the client. Then we help the client resource their problems, issues within this forum here. And finally, we refer the client for additional resources if need be. Then we have the evaluation stage. Now, pay attention. This stage deals with where the social worker is evaluating all the information that was gathered thus far on the client. And the social worker critically analyze, monitor, and evaluate his or her interventions. And this is done by a battery of questions that the social worker would ask himself or herself. For instance, what worked well and why? Or what did not work well and why it did not work well? This procedure is very vital in the sense of best practices, whereby the social worker can glean from their intervention whether it was effective or if they have to go back to the drawing board. Then we come to the final stage, which is the termination stage. We are going to pretend here that all the goals that were set between both parties, social worker and client, were achieved. So we recap on the goals that were achieved. And of course, there might be goals that are in progress or unfinished goals. These will be looked at and discussed here in this forum. And then we will finalize the work done with the client. So, of course, we do a general recap of everything. And this here, we give the client the room to voice, how they felt about the process and what worked well for them, what they like, what perhaps they did not like, etc. And then, of course, we say farewell to the client, but we say farewell and we leave an open door policy in the sense that if the client should need future assistance, they must feel free to contact you again. Now, let's do a participatory learning activities. Could you place yourself in group of threes and provide 2 examples for each stage in the change process? You will then present this in class. Okay, that was well done. Now, ending here, I am going to post on our discussion forum on Moodle. Please respond to the questions posted there. This carries a mark of 5% of your grades. And additionally, as a form of revision, you have a video with all the information that was done. You can revise. So for the upcoming tests, you can revise on the change process, also called the helping process. Okay, hope to see you in the next session.